And we will. It's okay. We'll call the meeting to order. I just want to start again as our new meeting. Just again acknowledging that we are holding this meeting in the traditional territories of the Coast and Strait Salish people, specifically the Lekwungen-speaking people known today as the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations, and that their connections to these lands continue to this day. I also want to point out to everybody, in case you missed the first announcement at the beginning of the public hearing, that these proceedings are webcast, and recorded for future access. So if you, just for everybody's awareness. We have an agenda in front of us tonight. I'm just going to ask that we just move item. Our agenda packages are laid out in a way under a procedures bylaw that is a requirement, but we have the ability to shift these around at the table. I would just ask that we move item number 3 to the end of the agenda. Just procedurally, we can't consider a heritage alteration permit until unless everything else goes forward as approved. So we just need to move that to the end. Otherwise, we'll continue to keep it in the same order. So if I could just have a motion to approve the agenda as suggested.
So approved.
Second.
Yep.
So moved. Sorry.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you. We have a couple of items to deal with before we get to any land use pieces, one of which is the Oak Bay Marina concrete waterproofing repair, and we have Ms. Sina Bay here with us tonight, our Director of Strategic Initiatives. Welcome. This is our first council meeting you've sat with us, so welcome and thank you for the report. If you could just give a quick overview, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The purpose of the report is to obtain approval to contract Flintstones Contracting to repair concrete and flashing at the Oak Bay Marina gift shop building at a cost not to exceed $75,970 plus GST. The district's lease with Oak Bay Marina stipulates that the district is responsible for upkeep of the building that requires repair. Building leaks have been an ongoing issue for the past 10 years, and attempts have been made to undertake repairs with minor patches, but those attempts have not met with success, so a more comprehensive solution is warranted. My predecessor arranged to have an engineer look at the situation and come up with estimates, and those estimates landed up being accommodated in the budget. So we do have money provided in the marina roof and structural repairs capital budget, and the proposal can be accommodated within that budget. So staff are recommending that the contract be approved. Council approval would allow the repairs to be started. It's anticipated that the work would be completed within about 6 to 8 weeks, and the work would be underseen by Herald Engineering. Staff's recommendation is to approve.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bay. Yeah, we want to start this before the rain starts. Is that the idea?
Yeah. Yes, I had that in the report that the aim was to complete the work before the rains started in earnest, but I think the rains have started, so the timing is of the essence.
So we have the report in front of us. Is there any discussion or questions from council? Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Worship. Through you to staff. Is there provision in the work that's contemplated to, I'm going to assume that however much deconstruction or disassembly that's going to be required through the work, are we going to get a better read on whether or not there's going to be further budget needs to come? Like as when this is all pulled apart, are we going to get a better idea that there should be a budget line item included into subsequent years for stuff that inevitably you discover when you start pulling things apart?
Ms. Bay?
Thank you. Through the chair. There is anticipated to be further work required at the building. We're anticipating that further work can be accommodated within the budget that has been provided, at least for this year, and then we'll have to consider whether there's additional works required in future years.
Thank you. Any other questions? Just need a motion.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Last call for conversation. All right, all those in favor? Opposed, not opposed. Thank you very much. Thank you for attending tonight. Item number 2 is a proposal to place temporary protection order at 1558 Beach Drive. And I just should point out, again, procedurally, this is a special council meeting. So under our procedures bylaw, we for a regular council meeting, we have public participation period. We don't have that today, so this is one of those things I know there's a lot of public interest in, but in this case, procedures bylaw just has us talking about it. But we do appreciate the staff having a staff report available to us, and I would suggest that we move forward with a 60-day protection order to consider various options to us. But I can't make the motion, so.
Second.
This is a motion to apply a 60-day protection order at 1558 Beach Drive. Any further discussion? Councillor Zelka?
Thank you, Chair. I've had a chance to take a look at the Local Government Act, in particular. Oh my God, I just lost it now. Oh, sorry. My computer. Let me catch up for a moment here. With respect to the temporary protection order and potential next steps, this report is rather silent as to what the next steps might be. So it's great that we'll be setting a 60-day pause on this. But I do see that the Local Government Act makes reference, for example, and we know in that area we have this heritage conservation area process that's unfortunately a coincident with this. When I look at timing, for example, over in New West, when they brought their HCA in, as soon as they endorsed their conservation review process, they immediately went into a work plan, and then once they had their work plan done a month later, they implemented something called a heritage control period. I was wondering if staff could tell us about a heritage control period and whether that might be something that would help with respect to next steps. Because I'm curious as to where we're going with this, please.
I think I might deal with this in different steps because they're slightly unrelated. One relates to the heritage conservation area consideration, not this property, and one takes consideration specifically to this property. So what we have as a motion right now is a 60-day protection order for this property. So what I would suggest is we have the discussion on this right now, and then that can be a secondary or third question attached.
I would, as long as I have an opportunity to ask a question about that, I'd appreciate it. I do understand that this property is at least going to be on a list having to do with the HCA, so that's why I feel there is some opportunity, I would hope, to at least ask a question about the HCA with respect to this.
Absolutely. The question of next steps would be a logical one, and I can bring that forward, or some suggestions on that as well. So right now we have the suggestion just to allow us to consider other options of a 60-day protection order on the table. Is there any discussion, or Councillor Zelka?
Then with respect to the 60-day protection order, what's going to happen once we approve it? Will there be staff reports? Will there be public meetings? Will the heritage? Will this be referred to the Heritage Commission? I was just wondering whether, because again, at the end, the staff report is relatively silent as to what the next steps is. So I'm curious with respect specifically to the 60-day protection order.
Turn to Mr. Anderson, but I would suggest is we ask direct staff to bring back a couple of options to us, at least one option. Which is the obvious one, which is the question of designation of the property. Mr. Anderson, is there anything else that you would make a suggestion on here on the 60-day protection order?
No, Your Worship. Just to confirm that the temporary protection order allows us to review what we have before us right now, and that is a property with identified heritage value. And as Council is aware from correspondence, that we do have building permit applications that relate to the proposed moving of the home, the demolition of the foundation and garage and carport, and as well as an application before us for a building permit for the construction of a new home. So the temporary protection order allows us to consider our alternatives as a municipality with respect to heritage protection of that property, and it affords us that time frame to conduct a review and to explore alternatives for the municipality to consider. So that is the purpose of the report and the motion that I believe you have in front of you.
Thank you. Councillor Braithwaite, then Green.
I just wonder if this does pass, the 60-day protection order, does that affect in any way the notice that has been given to the renters to vacate the premises?
Mr. Anderson?
Your worship, no, it does not. They're not directly related.
And Councillor Green?
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Anderson or Ms. Jensen or Mr. Buffett. I haven't looked at the legislation for a long time, but is the 60-day protection order, first of all, is it renewable at the end of the 60-day period? In other words, if we haven't reached a solution or a conclusion on the property, can we renew the 60 days and extend it?
Mr. Anderson?
Yes, Your Worship. No, the temporary protection order that is under this section of the legislation is a 60-day time period.
Thank you. And secondly, I share Councillor Braithwaite's concern, and I think I mentioned this the other evening, that that the future of these rental units and the people who actually live in them is a concern, although I realize it's outside our jurisdiction on heritage matters. I still want it on the record that we are, or at least I am, and Councillor Braithwaite is, and I think the rest of us are extremely concerned about the loss of housing for these individual people who have been longtime residents of our community.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion to apply a 60-day protection order? And I just want to make sure that I give Councillor Ney a chance because she's obviously just getting herself. No, it's okay. Take your time. Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to clarify, based on staff's comments, do we need to amend the motion to specifically include direction to staff to provide options, which it currently doesn't include?
I believe it would be better done as a separate motion. One is a very procedural piece under the Local Government Act, and another one would be asking for staff direction. So I'd rather separate those two pieces. Are we back online again, Councillor Ney? Any questions, comments at this point? Okay, thank you. So we have a motion on the table to apply a 60-day protection order at 1558 Beach Drive. Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. So here's where it would be appropriate to direct staff to provide a report on heritage designation on the property. If somebody wishes to do that, that would allow staff to come back with those options.
I will make the motion to request of staff that options be provided for heritage preservation or conservation of the property.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I'm just going to turn to Mr. Anderson. Is that sufficient for you to come back with options, or including designation?
It is, Your Worship. I just want to clarify that the designation bylaw would be specific to the property, and other options would involve examining options related to a broader area, just to clarify. So you may see separate sets of information from staff regarding the items that we've heard tonight.
Can we have clarification on the motion? I'd like then just to separate those two because they are quite different. So the motion I heard was to ask for heritage preservation and retention options specific to this property. I'm getting a nod from the mover and the seconder, so that should be clear in the motion. So this is specifically related to 1558 Beach Drive. Is there any other discussion on that motion? Councillor Zelka?
Because we have a heritage conservation area process, I presume, about to begin, and I will hope that staff at a very, very soon time will give us an update as to what's happening. I believe the next step on that process has to do with what's called a heritage control thing that I'm looking forward to hearing about, that has to do with the entire area, including 1558 Beach. I understand that's on the list. So, so while that's going on, and hopefully very soon, if we can make immediate motion or immediate movement on the property, I will gladly support the motion as indicated, in knowing that we've got this other process already in motion.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion here on 1558 to bring forward heritage protection options. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. And I believe it would not be inappropriate at all to make a motion to direct staff to come back unrelated to 1558, but related to there's certainly more than just this application. There's always development concerns, and there appears to be some more time before the HCA process concludes. If you wish to also bring forward a motion on just to ask staff for a report back on heritage protection period, then, or heritage control period, sorry, then that would be an appropriate thing to do at this time. I just want to separate the two, because one is broader.
So moved with respect to the heritage control period. Which I believe is the next step after since I believe we already endorsed the HCA, or we're about to. So I would definitely love to get at least a status report as to what's happening and how maybe there's ways we can expedite it possibly as well, but at the very least a status.
Okay, the motion is at this point that I heard was to bring forward a heritage control period options from staff to understand what those options are. Is that the motion?
As you indicated, asking for a report related to that, yes.
Thank you. Is there
Second.
Moved and seconded? Any other discussion on, Councillor Zelka?
So with respect to that, if staff could please comment, is this in general the next step anyway? So it sounds like I'm under the impression there aren't options, but if there are options, if I could just get an idea of what might be happening, just a preview, ideally.
For the heritage conservation area, you're speaking?
Yes.
Yeah. Mr. Anderson, we may bring this back as part of your report on the heritage control period, but if you're ready to give a verbal update on the heritage conservation area, it would be welcome.
Well, what I was going to mention off the top is that, yes, a heritage control period can be the precursor to the consideration of a heritage conservation area as an amendment to the official community plan. So that is something that is afforded a municipality to use as a tool as we work our way toward preparing that HCA. The HCA proposed for the area we refer to as the prospect area. That staff have begun work on that process, and we are working on the components of that amendment to the community plan, and we would have a process that would need some time associated with consultation with property owners in the area, and also bringing the package forward to committee and council for consideration of actual bylaw amendments to the community plan. So there is a process that's underway, and as I mentioned, an element of leading ourselves toward that conservation area is a control period as a protection tool. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Zelka?
Thank you. I'm looking at the thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the New Westminster website in the heritage area, where they indicated how they did their HCA process, and I was actually rather amazed at how fast they did it. They must have more staff than we have, and possibly more money as well, because within a month of approving their process, they had a work plan, and when 1 month thereafter, they went straight into a heritage control period, and then once that control period was specified, then they went into photographic inventory and community consultation. So a question back to staff is, are we anticipating a similar type of sequencing?
I believe we've already started part of that process. So, Mr. Anderson?
Yeah, as council is aware, Your Worship, we have proposed guidelines and a draft schedule that was presented by the working group to council, and that, in addition to preparing the actual amendment documents, is where we're moving next. So we are in the process. It's a similar process. We do have a good deal of documentation in place, and I think the New West example may have been going out and doing some further documentation, but we are moving ahead with the preparation of that HCA.
Councillor Zelka?
Final comment, and thank you very much for your indulgence in letting me speak so much about this. I look forward to the report back from staff on some indication of when this control period can be applied, ideally sooner instead of later. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? Thank you very much. And I think that both from the HCA perspective, I think that's a very positive thing, and I think also on the 1558 it helps get us some clarity on options. So thank you for that. We are moving on to item number 4 on the agenda, which is the bylaw memorandum for item number 5, which is the bylaw 4730, which I believe we can have a debate, frankly, on 4730 and 4731 simultaneously related to St. David Street. So that item is now open on the agenda. Oh, Councillor Braithwaite.
Yeah, I just have a question, just for clarification, because it came up a couple of times when people were speaking, and they were talking about, I think it was Mr. Houston that brought it up first, and they were talking about how under the Local Government Act, not having someone live in the residence for 6 months affected the legal non-conforming status, I think is what they were referring to. So I'm just looking for clarification on that from staff.
Ms. Jensen?
We're going to tag team on this one.
Sounds good.
In staff's opinion, that legal non-conforming status is still in place. As far as legal non-conforming status goes, you could have a full day legal seminar on just this portion of the Local Government Act alone. There is substantial case law out there that pertains to non-conforming use. There's sections on use, there's sections on buildings themselves, the structures themselves. Given that you have a building that's in place that still retains its structure as a duplex, staff consider that is still in place.
Thank you. Councillor Ney?
Through you, Chair, to staff, just a question of a point of clarification. The property we have before us is an RS5, as I understand, and I was just reviewing the zoning bylaw 35314 RS5 around the minimal square footage for an RS5. So given we've got this lot is, I believe, 12,090 square feet, could it be divided into 2 lots then under the RS5 zoning?
To confirm, the lot that's currently in place would have enough lot area to accommodate a 2-lot subdivision. That's barring any other review that we would have to do in terms of lot frontage, lot width, servicing, and so on.
So just to clarify, the current lot is 12,090 square feet, and an RS5 is 6,006 feet times 2 equals 12,012 square feet, which is under the 12,090 square feet of the existing lot.
I'm actually a little loath to throw staff completely on the piece.
You know what?
Sir-
I was just
No, I take the
thinking out
answer that
loud.
you gave
Yeah.
already, though, that the
Yeah.
lot area would allow for that, but there's many
That's-
items that get considered as part of the subdivision.
That's correct. Just to confirm, they have a lot area of just over 1,123 square meters. Breaking that into 2, both lots, if they went that direction, would be over the 558 square meters.
Okay, thank you. And the next question, really just for clarification, has to do with then notwithstanding temporary protection orders and a forced designation, et cetera. This current applicant has some options, presumably. So there's an HRA before us, but presumably, given my previous question and your response, another option could be to ask for a demolition permit and put up 2 single-family homes. That would be permissible. I mean, it would be subject to. Okay, so I just like that. That's the question. Okay.
I think Ms. Jensen's about to explain why she can't 100% answer that question.
Okay. So the question. Let me just reframe that then in a way that I could perhaps get a response from you. You have said that the lot is subdividable. It could be made into 2 single-family lots, RS5 zone.
Potentially.
Potentially. Are you able to answer this question? Is there anything at this point that would stop that from happening, given what currently is before us?
Well, as per subdivision process, the applicant would make an application for subdivision. We would look at it in terms of how they are meeting all of the district bylaws, and specifically to do with the zoning bylaw, density issues, lot width, setbacks, lot frontage, lot area, as well as servicing. So we would be looking at road widths and ability to connect it to infrastructure and so on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Green and then Patterson.
Thank you. Just three points for clarification, and and Councillor Braithwaite sort of touched on one of them. Could you clarify for me? There was a suggestion that the proponent, through you, Mayor, to staff, that the proponent was somehow being gifted money to renovate through the density bonusing of, I think the amount quoted was $500,000. That's the first question for clarity. Secondly, how is an HRA different from spot zoning? Because I believe they are. And third, could you clarify the issue of precedence? In other words, does an HRA set precedence in a neighborhood? Thank you.
Ms. Jensen, you going to have a shot at this?
Thank you, Your Worship. To your first point, a heritage revitalization agreement is intended to be a benefit to both the homeowner and the municipality. Any clauses that are contained with that and within that agreement have to be agreed to by both parties. There is no exchange of a dollar value. In this particular case, the owner would provide the home as a designated heritage building. They will be subject to various servicing requirements. In exchange, they are given the opportunity to retain 3 units within that building. The agreement itself would specify that they are responsible for ongoing maintenance of the home and the upgrades to the home as is set out in the revitalization agreement.
Thank you.
As to the second piece, with the Heritage Revitalization Agreement, first of all, it's not a change to the zoning. It is a very different process. It's a different process under the Local Government Act. One of the speakers earlier spoke to the legislation speaking to use of this for situations like this. So it's really intended to provide people who own heritage property an opportunity to do something else with their property while still maintaining that property. So it still retains the RS5 zoning. It would be subject to all the other requirements of the RS5 zoning except as was set out in the revitalization agreement itself. As for precedence, anytime an application comes forward for either a revitalization agreement or a development variance permit or a zoning or whatever it might be, we really do look at each of those on a case-by-case basis and the specifics of that individual site and the neighborhood.
Thank you very much.
That got all your questions answered? Any other? No? Okay, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to staff. This will follow up on the question raised by Councillor Ney, and that was about subdivision of the lot. If and I know that is not being considered now, but potentially, if that were to be considered, is that a matter for the approving officer of Oak Bay, or would it be a council matter?
Ms. Jensen?
There are actually two different components to that. If everything is clear in terms of how it meets the requirements of the district bylaws, that would go through the approving officer. If there was any need for any type of variances or a rezoning because they didn't have enough lot area, those types of considerations would come back to council.
Thank you. And just pressing on about that point and following up on Councillor Green's comments, if that were to be considered in the community, I would see that more as a spot zoning application than this that is being presented as the Heritage Revitalization Agreement. I don't know if staff would have a comment on that, but that is my perception of what it would be.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff at this time? I am not seeing any, so at this point I need a motion. It could be, the motion is laid out here. It could be third reading. It can also, we'll deal with them in order that they are on here, 4730, but it could be third reading, it could be decline, it could be to defer for some additional specific reason, or it could be something else that council deems appropriate. I'm here as the chair, not the movers.
I'm going to make a motion to give third reading to bylaw numbers 4730 and 4731.
We'll do them
Second.
separately, 4730.
Okay, 47.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Third reading is now live on the table, and this is the point at which we debate said reading. Councillor Appleton, you are the mover. You have the, if you wish to, make the first statement to motivate.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'd just like to thank, as always, the members of the public who have come out to speak to this and taken time out to lend their opinions, and for everybody for sharing that. I am in favor of the motion and of the heritage revitalization that is on the table. There's a couple of different reasons for that. As we have heard staff speak to and other councillors ask for clarification from staff, the HRA does not constitute a spot zoning. I do understand the community's concern about spot zoning, and I share those concerns. An HRA in and of itself doesn't constitute a spot zoning, but rather an adaptive reuse of an existing building. The challenge that we have in Oak Bay, as everybody I think is well aware, as well plugged in members of the community, is that we are dealing with a consistent loss of buildings which contribute to the character of Oak Bay. So then we are challenged by what is the best opportunity to retain those buildings. This building is a large building with lots of capacity. It has heritage value. When it comes to heritage value, as council has heard me say before, I fall back on the guidance and the expertise of the Heritage Commission and of the experts that review as part of the statement of significance. I see that it does have heritage value. This provides an opportunity to retain that building, which has heritage value and is quite individual and unique in its own way. And makes for an adaptive reuse of that building. I've heard the comments from the members of the public about the single-family character of the street, and I hear those comments. I'm also very well aware of the fact that this has not been a single-family residence for quite some time. Its duplex status, at least its two-family status, dates back quite some time, and so I have a hard time in terms of assessing its heritage, the heritage of this individual building. I see its heritage lying in its multi-unit character and in its multi-use, and we've heard from some members of the public its use as a multi-unit building and the value that had in the past. When comments are made about other places being more suitable for density, I struggle with finding another location around Oak Bay in a single family residential area or in a established neighborhood that would be more appropriate for this type of reuse. It's half a block away from the avenue, which is serviced with transit. All of the amenities are an easy walk away. And so I feel that goes a long way to addressing concerns about parking, about how people are going to get around and how many cars are going to be on the street. I hear that very clearly from the folks who are here, and I share those concerns. If you're going to provide additional dwelling units, which in effect, this is really the same number of dwelling units, but if you're going to provide additional dwelling units, you really need to make sure that those are provided for so that it's not a traffic impact. I won't go on at length here, but I will make a comment, and I think that it's important to say is that I am very committed to the idea of providing housing options and different housing options within this community and ensuring continuing access to rental housing in this community. I would be disappointed, and I don't feel like it's in the best interests of the community, in my opinion, and in the best application of the OCP to lose rental units out of this existing building in favor of conversion to one single family dwelling at 5,000 square feet. So I could go on about other details there, but I think that the retention of this heritage building And the ongoing provision of rental in close proximity to the village center makes a very compelling case for the Heritage Revitalization Agreement, and I'm supporting it.
Councillor Patterson, you were the seconder. I'll give you the right to speak next.
Thank you, Mayor. And I also would like to thank all of the members of the community, and even from external to the community, that came out to speak tonight. And I think, we hear the concerns on both sides, and certainly in looking at the map that was provided, when I look at the number of people that were against and the people that were for and the people that remained neutral, there are more that either didn't come to speak or that actually support the application than the people we heard from, and that were against this, and often that is the case. I can certainly say that as the council liaison to the Heritage Commission, Oak Bay's Heritage Commission is comprised of a group of very knowledgeable individuals about heritage. They also love the community, and they really do question the developments that are brought to them for consideration. They ask many questions to ensure that they have full knowledge of what they are considering, and so they are making a very informed opinion and providing their recommendation to council. And they do support this application for a number of reasons that Councillor Appleton has already mentioned. There is a history of this building having multi-residential going back a few decades, so it's not like it is changing the usage of the building itself. We also, I think, recognize, and often it comes up at the Heritage Commission, that just simply because of the nature of long-term residents in the community, that the applications that come forward that we see, often you get new houses now in this community, and we call them single-family homes, but there are really only 2 occupants in them. And then we have many of the homes in the community that the Heritage Commission views that were used lovingly for many decades as family homes, but the children are grown, they're off in their own homes, and so we often have these lovely heritage homes that end up ultimately with one person, and then sometimes become really derelict because of an owner aging and just having. We have a time period when the properties are not cared for, they're not maintained. And so certainly it is a goal of the Heritage Commission, as is stated in the OCP, to really support a continued community commitment to protection and conservation of heritage where it is within the opportunity to do so. And when we looked at this application, certainly we recognized that this actually was quite a difficult preservation and conservation of the building for the owner in question, because it's a real quality preservation that is being done. It's a costly venture for the owner. They're using high quality materials, and the units that will be used for rental and for the owner's occupancy are done to high quality standards and will meet the building code regulations, fire code regulations, and so bring quality living quarters for the owner and for the occupants that will rent space in the building. Doing this as an HRA affords also some protection to the community in a number of positive ways. Through the rental agreement, it protects the community against the short-term rentals that are met with such disfavor in the neighborhood, because the rental agreement provides that it is not going to be used for vacation accommodation. it also continues to allow the district to enforce standards of maintenance so that the building is not allowed to become derelict as it has, and unfortunately we know it has been an eyesore for many years now, but this agreement will actually protect, because we're allowed to enforce maintenance standards and inspections on the dwelling. So I think there is a further guarantee that this will be a quality housing unit within the community and really not change the status of what it has been. So there were just so many favorable aspects to this. And it was mentioned a couple of times that the heritage conservation, heritage protection, keeping these heritage buildings in the community and having multi-residential like this actually detracts from the value of homes in the other area. This came up at the Heritage Conference, the BC Heritage Conference in BC in May, and one of the facts that was brought forward coming from Canada Heritage Program, because they have done many studies on this and they are attached to their website online. The studies have shown that heritage conservation projects increase property values, assessment values, and economic activities in the surrounding areas. So there are many positive reasons for doing this, and I, as do the members of the Heritage Commission, support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I have Councillors Green, then Zelka, then Nay.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, thank you to all the neighbors who came out to speak tonight. It's always good to get people participating in their local government process, and this is one of the best ways to do it. And after all, 97% of the work we do at this table involves land use. As a former chair of the Heritage Commission myself, as a member, and as a former councillor in Oak Bay in 2011 to 2013, I was also Heritage Council liaison. So I know the extent of work that the Heritage Commission expends on behalf of our community to make the best decisions possible around the land use issues involving heritage. I also know St. David as well as a lovely street, but it also has high density across the street from this home and further up in the form of townhouses. There are many, as Councillor Patterson has mentioned, there are many very good features to this proposal. It is not an ad hoc, one-off, or precedent-setting project. That is not what an HRA is. It is the owner's family home and will be owner-occupied, which is a huge advantage for the neighborhood and neighbors. It has supported the Heritage Commission. It adds green space to the neighborhood, and this has not been the case in new builds. A lot of new builds in South Oak Bay in particular have removed all the green space and everything green from a lot, and they've built lot line to lot line. In this case, the owner is increasing the green space on that property and tearing down an old garage. She is adding one unit to rental housing stock, which is incredibly valuable in Oak Bay right now, because we do have a housing crisis, and we have it's a real problem for people to access housing in Oak Bay. This will require ongoing maintenance of the property through the HRA, and the streetscape is retained, and not only retained, improved. There will be on-site parking, and there will be charge stations for electric vehicles. I mean, that's an incredible, I think this is the first proposal I have ever seen to include that kind of environmental protection. I wanted to talk about, there was great concern on the part of the neighborhood about what this would bring to the neighborhood. If this was approved, what else would happen on that street? Well, I can tell you that the north end of Roslyn is very much like, and that I live on Roslyn between McNeil and Windsor, but the north end is a dead end, quiet street, excuse me. a number of years ago, there was an HRA approved there. Another one was approved at the corner of Roslyn and Windsor. We have an HRA and conversion that was approved and built at the corner of McNeil and Foul Bay Road. And there is one, a complete restoration on Curry near Windsor Park. And I can honestly say that that hasn't started a mad rush to build hundreds of them across the municipality. In each of those areas, they have brought huge assets to not only the neighborhood, but the street. The other advantage to this proposal is tree canopy. So it will be increased, not decreased. And finally, I do have some comments that are personal in a way. I wanted to tell you that neighborhoods provide a sense of belonging for people, whether they rent or own. They should be inclusive. And in a more and more disconnected world, neighborhoods are one of the few places where we can actually connect with each other. You talked about block parties, and those are wonderful ways of coming together. But whether you rent or own on the street, that shouldn't determine your sense of belonging. And I have family members who rent in Oak Bay, and they are not transient. I have friends who rent in Oak Bay, and they are not transient. And furthermore, they provide incredible contributions to our community as volunteers, as working people, as supporting organizations in our community. So I wanted to make that statement because I'm concerned that this HRA in particular, and we've had similar issues with others, that they are not being supported by neighborhoods. And in fact, this is a gift to your neighborhood by the owner and by the community. So that's all I have to say. I appreciate that you came out tonight, and thank you. And I will support this proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Green. I have Councillor Zelka, then Councillor Ney.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to everyone who spoke at the public hearing. It's obviously to me that this neighborhood is very close-knit, and people care about each other. So thank you very much for coming out. I'll say out front that I'm going to be speaking in favor of the motion. I want to thank Councillor Appleton for speaking so well and say many of the points I wanted to make as well. I am looking for what's been referred to as gentle densification, and our OCP, our heritage plans, point to some of the low-hanging fruit is secondary suites, which have their issues, but the thing that I really like, in particular for Oak Bay, with the heritage buildings that we have, the beautiful large heritage buildings, in fact, is the heritage conversions, sometimes referred to as multiple conversion dwellings. And finding ways of saving these buildings and repurposing them. Heritage should be a living, breathing thing. It doesn't get stuck in time. So a 1912 house, obviously we have to replace the knob and tube. We have to replace the lead pipes. We have to replace all these things that, God forbid, we'd never do today. Those are not heritage. Those are improvements because things change. So if we don't change, I have a real worry that the 2018 CRD Regional Growth Strategy document, which is the closest thing we have to population projections for Oak Bay, my worry is that they will come true. The 2018 CRD Regional Growth Strategy suggests that by 2038, Oak Bay's population will have reduced by 16%. Looking at some of the size of the houses and some of the loss of the tree canopy with respect to footprint of houses and the small number of people that are being put in these houses worry me with respect to the future of this district moving forward. Not just from a tax-based perspective. I don't want to live in a community that is hollowed out, and this is one of my worries. So finding ways to have affordable housing, I will look for that, and I certainly want to encourage it. So I applaud the proponent coming forward with what appears to me to be a very gentle way of addressing the problems that Oak Bay has. I was more than impressed that built into the housing agreement, which will be coming up later on this evening, is the absolute outlawing of what's referred to as travel accommodations. So of the units that are being legalized and being set up, there'll be no Airbnb set up. This type of a housing agreement was used for the Cadborough Bay and Bowker Creek building. We also made sure that a similar type of housing restriction on Airbnbs was also put into that 44-unit building. To ensure that if the owner is not going to be using it and they're willing to rent it out, it won't be for transient accommodation. It'll be for people who are willing to be here and ideally here for a long time, and have an opportunity to put down roots. So I applaud the owner for that amongst many nuances to the application. I do note that the small strip of land to the side of it appears to be only about 30 meters by about 120 meters, which where two cars are going to be put. To my calculations, that's nowhere near large enough to potentially subdivide this property. And if we are going to be designating it with an HCA, I don't see how the approving officer could do anything without council being involved. So, I appreciate the question, but it's not a worry that I have. And I think that's enough. I have enough familiarity with HRAs to know that this doesn't set a precedent. It is an opportunity on an individual basis, heritage home by heritage home, for us to come up with something that works specifically for that lot. So I hear the concerns with respect to governance. And God knows, before I became a councillor, before I had a reason to read the Local Government Act and figure out how land is actually the land use is actually regulated, I had wonders about some of those things as well. But precedent is not something that I have seen is a concern for an HRA. And I also don't consider this a spot zoning, since it's a relatively similar usage. So I don't really see us adding or changing anything. The final thing I'll point out is that this building is directly across the street from a parking lot. So I understand the concerns that the neighbors to the side and behind have, but with respect to the context, I couldn't think of a better type of a heritage building in that sort of location that I would want to see converted and legalized with respect to multiple conversion dwelling. So for those reasons, I'll be supporting this and most likely the following motions as well. Thank you.
The following motions are quite closely tied together. We have Councillor Ney next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to thank the many people who came out to speak to this application, and particularly sharing with us the sense of connection and community that you have in your neighborhood. It's always just good to hear that that's how our community works, and it's clear that you value that, and so do all of us in the larger community when we hear those kinds of stories around neighborhood connection. I'm going to support the motion, and I'm not going to reiterate many of the very good points my council colleagues have already spoken to, but just very briefly, my argument goes like this: we've agreed as a community that we will protect and preserve heritage in our community. That's something we've all agreed to here. It's in our OCP. Our community, our larger community, values heritage. What we have before us here is an opportunity to do just that using this HRA tool. If we were not to accept this application, that property is at risk of being toppled with 2 single-family homes. That's what we're hearing from our staff. That is potentially a possibility. And that's not the kind of housing option we need in this community, are more single-family homes. We need other kinds of housing options, as is articulated repeatedly in our OCP and with surveys that we've conducted in the community. So what we will end up with is the use of this house, but it will be legalized and it will have some certainty into the future. And it will offer us a housing option that will contribute to our rental stock, and it will be permanent under the covenant of the HRA. That rental stock will be available to people in this community in perpetuity. So, and that's of value as well, because it offers another form of housing stock. I'm going to support this because it contributes to the preservation of heritage. It offers another housing option here. And I believe in time that you will see that this will actually contribute to the value of this neighborhood. And I know for certain it will for the community at large.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to keep my comments pretty brief, I think. I'm probably going to be the Charlotte Bowman up here. I'm going to actually vote against this, and here's my reasons why. I really appreciate the fact that Ms. Bowman wants to create a smaller environmental footprint and long-term rental housing. I do appreciate that. I think that she has stated that she wants this house to stay in her family for another 40 years and have her daughter live in that house for many, many years to come. So I highly doubt that she would want to rip it down. But I think that she should be allowed to have the duplex there. I just don't think we should extend that to the triplex. And I believe that my reasoning for that is because from listening to the neighbors. The neighbors really feel, and I think rightly so, someone said that it's like Russian roulette. And I agree with that. It's like, if we had our housing strategy in place, I would feel much more comfortable with moving ahead with this. I agree with HRAs. I think our Heritage Commission does a wonderful job presenting these to us and giving us the arguments on why to support these. And I would wholeheartedly agree with that. But in this particular case, I just think that it's not perhaps the right location for this. I think, again, a duplex here, but not a triplex. And I think that one other point I wanted to make was that I heard someone say that a couple of people say that in the application they have talked about not allowing this to become an Airbnb. Well, Airbnbs are illegal in Oak Bay, so they couldn't do that anyhow. So if it was done as an Airbnb, we would have the neighbors would have the bylaw officer there to shut that down. So I don't think that we can really throw that in there. I think that we do have to keep our community diverse, so the duplex does this. Again, the HRA, I'm in favor of these, and this particular one to me is not supported by the neighbors, so I don't really feel like I could support it in that regard. And I'm quite sure I'm going to be in the minority here, but that's my reasons for voting against this.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite, for articulating your stance. I think the pros and cons on this one have been largely laid out. I want to just express my appreciation for the thoughtful discussion here, and from the people who came to the microphone, which is never easy on either side of an argument. I do hear many of the concerns of the neighbors. I think certainly the idea of spot zoning is an anathema to me. I don't think it's a good policy. However, I also recognize that we have to treat any application like this on its merits and consider it. It is not a zoning change, it is an HRA, and we have to differentiate those two. I also expressed my concerns when it came forward to committee of the whole. I believe that triplexes are not well supported in the community. I think that is that's a valid, the survey done in the official community plan bore that out. However, again, nothing's written in stone, and I'm also acutely aware of the fact that an old heritage home on Beach Drive that was carved into 7 suites is now being lamented for losing those suites. So, we get used to what's there, and I think the that's something we have to sort of consider. And I think probably on the flip side of that, just the fact that this has been a duplex for 80 years and a triplex for 50 years or close to is indication that it probably hasn't. It probably can fit into the community as it stands. I will say, I think my personal taste doesn't come into this. It's not my favorite design of house, but I also recognize it does have heritage, merit, and value. And I would also just reiterate that I share concerns of the neighbors with parking. I think that we don't know who's going to live there in the future or the uses of it, but the shortage of parking may or may not come into that as a piece. But overall, I would say that the positives of this, I think someone mentioned in the course of this, the OCP talking about existing patterns of land use. And I think that is an important statement because we have single family houses, but we do have many instances of one-offs like this nestled into our community in amongst single family. And I think that model, frankly, is not a bad one for our community, where we have largely single family homes with the occasional duplex or even townhouse development that provides housing options. And so the broader question, I'm really looking forward to this in the big picture of our community, is this housing framework, and what can we allow in that will keep the character of the community and yet allow for new housing options to be built. And I'm very encouraged by the work that the staff is doing and in preparation for that debate. I'm looking forward to the public debate. And I will say the positive thing about these sorts of applications, and the reason that we consider them and don't just say because we're undertaking a framework we're going to put this off. We have to consider them as they come forward, as they do help inform our decision making. And it's easier when you have concrete examples to see how they work and how they fit in. So with that, anybody else wish to speak at this time? All right, I will call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Braithwaite opposed. That was third reading. I need adoption. Need a motion for adoption of Bylaw 4730.
Move adoption of Bylaw 4730.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Braithwaite opposed. Thank you. We'll now move on to Bylaw 4731 for third reading.
Move approvals, Bylaw 4731.
It's third reading. Sorry, move third reading.
Move third reading.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Braithwaite opposed. And adoption?
Move adoption, Bylaw 4731, Heritage Designation for 1416, 1418 St. David.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Item number 7, which is the housing agreement for 4738, Bylaw 4738.
There's a third reading.
Second.
Yes. Actually, move the first 3 readings.
I'd like to move the first 3 readings.
Should I move, Ms. Hopkins, should I move first and second prior to the third? Okay, I'll move. So we need a motion for first and second reading.
Move first and second reading of Bylaw 4738, having to do with the housing agreement.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the housing agreement? This is quite separate from the bylaw. Councillor Zelka.
Yes, a question through to staff. I was wondering if I should have prepared you for this. I do apologize. It's to building and inspections having to do with the housing agreement of the Cadborough Bowker building. That was the last time I saw something like this having to do with restrictions on travel accommodations. I believe, if I remember correctly, we actually defined what travel accommodation was, maybe possibly more explicitly in that other agreement, having to do with no rental of less than 30 days along those lines. This is my memory. But this agreement doesn't go into that level of detail. I was wondering if you could please comment on that in terms of what you consider to be the short term. What is the definition of short term, please?
Ms. Jensen, can you? I'll give you a second to read through the wording.
Section 4.1 gets into the details, but there's a very brief definition in section 1.1.
Your Worship, I think the question relates to perhaps why a housing agreement in a previous had a specific reference to the 30-day period, and my comment related to that is that temporary rental is generally defined as less than 30 days, and that's in legislation. It's not something that we need to put in individual housing agreements. So I think that's why you're seeing it in a more current housing agreement, perhaps, not in there.
I would tend to agree with you, and I take solace that specifically it outlaws commercial use of the building, which I believe Airbnb is considered commercial. So I'm satisfied with the way it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Any other discussion at second reading? All right, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Braithwaite opposed. And the and third reading at this point of 4738.
Move third.
Oh, sorry. There's no adoption on this one. Is it just third reading for a housing agreement? Okay, so just move third reading.
Move third reading. Bylaw number 4738, housing agreement for 1416, 1418 St. David Street.
Second.
Moved and seconded. We don't really have discussion on third reading. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. And just for our attention, we're going back to item number 3. And one opposed, Councillor Braithwaite. Sorry. I'm into a rhythm here. Heritage going to item number 3, which is the Heritage Alteration Permit approval process. This is it need a motion to approve.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Councillor Zelka?
I guess it'll be a similar question to what possibly came up at another HRA. I believe this heritage process commits staff to this process over time, and I understand there has to be some sort of a is it year over year or some sort of a process over time where some sort of inspections. I just wanted to ask about that. What is staff's process with respect to fulfilling the obligations of staff over time regarding this HRA permit and the promises that not only are being done by the owner but also by us?
I'll think it's Ms. Jensen or Mr. Anderson. Mr. Anderson. This is
I
for the alteration permit specific to the work being done.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was related to the maintenance component.
I know it is a permit specifically for the work, but doesn't this also tie into the statement of significance and the conservation plan and all those various things that we have to do over time?
Ms.
Just wanted to
Jensen?
ask.
So the Heritage Alteration Permit is intended to really specify what works it is that they need to do. So through the issuance of a building permit, they would begin works. Staff are regularly on site to ensure that they are completing the works as is set out in the Heritage Alteration Permit. At the end of that process, we do another complete review to make sure that that building is completed to how it was that they were set out to do. If you're speaking to the longer term that's set out in the ongoing maintenance for the Heritage Revitalization Agreement, as previously mentioned to Council, we are in the process of setting up essentially a database so we can keep track of the Heritage Revitalization Agreements. I wouldn't say that it's a structured process, but staff are regularly out in the community, and so we do have an opportunity to keep an eye to make sure that these buildings are not falling into disrepair.
And I apologize, Chair, I should have been more specific. I appreciate the answer, and that is very close to what I'm looking for. Page 13 of the attachment goes into the actual, I guess it's called the Heritage Conservation Plan attached to this permit. And Appendix A talks about an inspection cycle. So unlike a building permit, which is like a single inspection at the end and it's done, this I believe would have cycles of inspection over time. So that's what I was asking about. How will we be fulfilling the cycles of inspection? Thank you.
I'm brewing the lack of page numbers on some of these. Page 13, okay. Ms. Jensen, you have it?
Thank you, Your Worship. So Schedule B, the inspection checklist, is not really oriented towards the district itself. What they are saying through this schedule is that these are the components of the building that are considered to be of importance, that have heritage value, and that these are the elements that we should be looking at over the years to ensure that they are retained in good condition.
And the last clarification, if I may, is we meaning the district, or we meaning the owner, we meaning who?
Ultimately, it is the responsibility of the homeowner to make sure that these are retained in good condition.
Thank you. It's good to have this clarification. I'm sure Ms. Bowman is listening carefully to all this. Understand the responsibilities attached. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? One opposed. Councillor Braithwaite opposed. And any that we are now at the end of our meeting. Just need a motion
Move
to adjourn.
adjournment.
Second.
Moved and seconded, and before I call the question, I'll just say thank you to everybody for your another long evening tonight, for all the work put in, and to staff for support. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed? Thank you very much.